for me, having a travel podcast, I was like, this is not going to like discourage me. I'm going to find a way to keep putting out content. I'm going to keep making episodes. As much as I would like to say that COVID has not discouraged me from podcasting, lately it has a little bit, because I don't want to beat the COVID thing to death, and I have just been trying to think about traveling in different ways than how we necessarily talk about it, as such as us taking a trip somewhere. So I'm just trying to think about it differently and not so linearly.
Podcast Junkies, episode 258. Welcome back. I'm your host, Harry Duran. If you're new, this is the one where we search out interesting and fascinating voices in podcasting and learn a little bit more about what makes them tick and how they started their show and what else is on their mind. In case you missed last week's show, we had a great conversation with Kimmy Culp, host of All the Wiser. This week, I speak to Jarika Johnson, host of Blackpacking podcast, and she joins the show to share how her love of travel sparked the inspiration to start Blackpacking, a show that shares stories of Black travelers and where we go around the world. Through her podcast and blog, she's become recognized as an authoritative voice in the podcast industry. In this episode, we share what Jarika describes as the spiritual experience of traveling, how COVID has impacted both the travel industry and her show, and her upcoming cross-country road trip. We talk about content creation, the intimate nature of interviews, and best practices for landing sponsorships. This episode is brought to you by Focusrite and specifically the Scarlett 2i2 sound card, one of my favorite go-to sound cards, something I use for each and every podcast recording. The 3G line is a go-to for all new podcasters. Find out more at podcastjunkies.com/Focusrite, and the link will be in the show notes as well. As always, full show notes available at podcastjunkies.com/258. And if you're enjoying this episode or past episodes, I'd love it if you leave a rating and a review at ratethispodcast.com/podcastjunkies. Make sure you stay to the end of the episode where I reveal this week's retention hashtag. But for now, let's get Blackpacking with Jarika. So Jarika Johnson, host of the Blackpacking podcast, thank you so much for joining me on Podcast Junkies.
Thank you for having me. How's it going?
It's going well. We were just chatting a little bit about this energy that's in the air. Thankfully, things are going well with me and my agency. And then you started telling me you just turned 30, which is an amazing milestone. So,
Yes.
So happy birthday.
Thank you.
And I get the sense from the way you were describing it that things are looking good, given the year and a half everybody's gone through. I think it's anywhere we can look for positive vibes or, signs of abundance, I think are a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and a few friends rented a cabin for my 30th birthday, and it was on a lake, and the weather was amazing. And we got this idea to shoot a scary movie while we were at the cabin, and I actually just finished editing it last night and sent it to them. And it, it actually didn't turn out too bad, considering it was very low budget, but we had a great time with it.
Is it you or your friends? Who's got the filmmaker bug?
Well, I've always wanted to make a film, and I do a lot of screenwriting on the side. And one of my other friends is into photography and does a little bit of videography. And then of course we have our actor friend. So, and then the other two just kind of got wrapped in it, but we're all kind of creatives. So, and we just put our creative energy together, and we were able to produce something in a few days.
What's a recent movie you've seen that's inspired you?
That's a great question, because I just watched Nomadland.
Oh my God, we just watched it last night.
2 nights ago. And, I'm actually preparing to do a cross-country road trip this summer. And so I saw that, and then I saw that it won Best Picture, and I was the signs, and everything. It was one of the things I really liked about the movie was there's not a whole lot of action going on, but it's just something about it is super wholesome and it's shot really well. And you're just wow, I just really enjoy this ride and this journey that I'm on. So I loved it, everything about it.
That's such great timing, because my partner and I, we just watched it last night because we watched the Golden Globes too, just and then it's we keep hearing the buzz.
Yeah.
And I think, anyone who's going in to expect a lot of dialogue or a lot of things going on, I think what's captivating people who, have been raving about it, I think is just, again, related to what we've gone through. It's just this idea of being outdoors, the pacing is like so slow. And sometimes I kept telling my partner, I was like, "Are we watching a documentary or are we watching a movie?" Because it's like the acting. I feel like some of those people were actually like the real people too.
Oh,
So
yeah, I know,
yeah.
right? So, yeah, that's been I actually kind of wanna watch it again because I feel like there's a lot of little things that I missed because I was so, like, relaxed while watching it, and I was just
Mm.
kind of, like, doing other things, but it just I don't know, definitely something I'll revisit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So this ties in wonderfully to the origin story for your podcast, right?
Yeah,
So
mhm.
I get the sense that this wanderlust is in your blood and it's been something that's been part of you for a while. So talk about where that all started.
I would probably say, I mean, it started when I was younger. My mom, like, always I felt like we were always traveling. We were always going on trips, and she is just like, "I love, like, hitting the road." She's like, "I can drive for, like, 10 hours and, like and be totally okay with it," and she'd always tell me how, like, my great uncle used to work for Greyhound, and for some
Mm,
reason, that was, like, like, worked for Greyhound for, like, 30, 40 years, something like
wow.
that, and she was like, "That's where I get it from." So I remember her always telling me that, and then also, my dad is the same way that my parents are separated, but my dad, like, loves taking trips, like, by himself. That's, like, his thing. It's, like, his getaway. He loves going to the beach, so I just
Yeah.
oddly feel like both of my parents, like, despite not being together, like, instilled this, like, idea at a very young age of, like, getting out there, going to new places, like, experiencing new things, so I think it, like, all started when I was, like, really, really young.
What's an early trip you remember that made an impact on you?
I remember taking a cruise. That was a lot of fun. Did like the little like Bahamas cruise
Okay.
and it was like a family thing. And I just remember like I have like pictures of it and I just remember like being on the pool on the top story and just like hanging out and there were other kids around and just like other families. They're just like and it was just a blast and I remember like my mom and like my older family members like them like drinking and me having like virgin like pina coladas and like Shirley Temples and just like feeling like, I was living like a very luxurious life
That's
on the
so
cruise.
funny. Well, it's just like the commercials, right? Those Carnival Cruise lines.
Yep. It's exactly like the commercials. They're not doing any false advertising there.
I've never been on a cruise. I've never traveled like over a body of water on a boat or even just done any of those 3-day trips. It's always been fascinating for me. Like some people like freak out at the idea of being like on a ship for, for that
Yeah,
long.
I know.
Yeah. But I wonder if you're a kid, you're not thinking about that stuff. You
Oh,
just see like this amusement park on the water.
yeah, exactly, exactly, and, I haven't, like, revisited the cruise department being an adult now, which I really think I should because it just seems like
Yeah.
I don't know, it seems like fun even just for, like, a few days.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so then is that sort of like you had the bug and you started taking as you started becoming an adult, going out on your own and taking trips as well?
Yeah, I would take, like, small trips, nothing crazy, but I had always, like, wanted to, like, study abroad when I was in college. Like, that's what one thing I always told myself I was gonna do, and I never got the chance. I was so busy with, like, school, I was working 2 jobs, and I was, like, trying to, like, work those 2 jobs to, like, afford a study abroad program, and, like, each semester, I just watched them, like, roll by and, like, get more
Mm,
expensive and be like, I don't think I can do it." Then I have to take
yeah.
off time for work and, like, taking off time for work and school, just, like, I couldn't make it work, and so I was like, "I'm just gonna keep working these 2 jobs until I graduate, and then I'm just gonna travel a bunch when I graduate," and that's kinda, like, what I did.
And were you always thinking to document the trip or did you keep a journal or is that something, or is just were you talking about it to your friends the minute you got back and you're like, all right, Jericho, enough with the trip. Like we've heard it.
Well, the funny thing is I actually when I, like, get back from trips, like, people are like, "Oh my god, like, how was your trip?" And I'm like, "Oh, it was
Yeah.
fine." And I never, like, go into, like, too much detail about it because, 1, like, I don't wanna, like, be like, "Oh, I did all these amazing things," and,
Yeah.
like, you weren't there. And
Yeah.
then 2, I just felt like I always had a very, like, kind of, like, spiritual, like, a very, like, self-changing thing that happened within myself that I felt like the person I was talking to, I felt like there was, like, a disconnect in, like, sharing my experience with them, especially because a lot of it was like so personal and I felt like personal growth and so hard to like tell someone, oh, so I had all these crazy thoughts like during my trip and like trying to like dissect that with them, especially if they haven't experienced that themselves. So I always kind of like kept those things to myself. I never journaled. I would take pictures at the beginning and then I kind of like, I don't know really why I'm like taking pictures. I have such
Mm,
like a good like visual memory and like I really enjoyed like being in the moment, which was hard because I'm very into photography. So it was like hard to like do that.
yeah.
But I just got like comfortable with like not taking pictures. I also felt like it was a little invasive sometimes. And so I just wanted to just really blend in as much as possible. And I guess with that said, that's how the podcast came about because I
Hmm.
I did want to like have some type of content, but I didn't know like what I wanted it to be.
Have the trips always been a spiritual experience for you, or does it depend on where you've gone and how long you've been?
I would say, where I've gone and like the duration I've been there definitely impacts maybe the level of spirituality I
Hmm.
experienced during those trips, but just about every trip I've taken, especially out of the country, has been solo. So with that, it's just naturally,
Yeah.
just spending time with yourself and just like absorbing all this like new information, all like learning about different cultures and like honestly like learning like things that you weren't taught in school or a different
Mm,
version of it. And I'm
mm.
just like, and it just really got me thinking about myself and like what I've learned and just like my environment, all of those things. So, and that it's every trip for me, really.
I just love these conversations because I have no idea like where they're gonna go,
Yeah.
and sometimes they go some really awesome places. This is fun. What did you learn about yourself on these trips?
I learned that I am like, even though I do these like really bold trips, I'm really like still afraid to do a lot of things. I'm still really timid about trying new things, like new food, and just kind of like exploring different things. I'm kind of afraid of heights or like they make me uneasy.
Okay.
So that's like one thing that I've like learned about myself is that like water, like rough water, I'm not a big fan of either, you know? And I just kind of like learned that I can be a little scaredy cat about like certain things.
Yeah.
And then I've also just learned like how I interact with people, especially like new people and like how I try to like relate to them or like engage with them. I just learned about myself, really, just spent a lot of time with myself and really like knowing who I am.
That's fascinating. And what did it teach you? What did you learn, or how were your eyes opened from experiencing other cultures and other places?
It's such like a that's such a loaded question because like there's just so many like little things that I've learned, but I'm trying to think of something that I've learned how important family is and
Mm,
within different cultures and how much they value like family really and how that's like there's just like such a strong like bond and like kind of like shield that people put around their family members, which I find to be like very interesting. Not that I feel like here in the States that like that the idea of family is devalued, but there's just something, I don't know, there's just something like you have like in certain cultures, you just have like generations of families living together, like their entire lives.
oh yeah.
And so there's never really kind of like that separation of maybe like a kid going and exploring a different part of the world for like years on end. It's always like they're kind of just right there with their family. So that's one thing I've really taken away, or just like family values that different cultures have kind of like instilled within themselves.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's something that if you don't leave this country, and there's people that haven't even left their hometown
Mhm.
probably,
Yeah.
and not having that perspective of how other cultures and other people live and the things that they hold valuable, and how much importance they give to things like a family unit and family structure,
Mhm.
and also respecting elders as well, right? Because that's
Mhm.
something we don't see a lot of here in this country. And I think having your eyes open to that is just like a wonderful gift. So that sounds really, really nice.
Yeah, and just like as far as like family goes, just like I feel like some of their daily lives are like so simple, a lot more simple. Like than mine. I feel like there's not as many like distractions. There's not like so much information. There's just not a lot going on in their world. It's like just day in day out is like very simple, very normal, very average, and I really admire that.
Yeah, I remember early on when I discovered culture in Europe and specifically Spain, right? Because I've been to France, I've been to Italy, Germany, Netherlands, Spain. Love Spain.
Mhm.
I think part of my heritage may come from there because I was born in El Salvador, but according to my dad, we may be like three or four generations away from it. So it feels like a connection when I was there.
Yeah.
But when I first heard about the concept of a siesta and like this idea of like spending 3 hours in the afternoon, you just take a break and you just like even the shops close up and
Mhm.
stuff. It's really like an awareness of like, wow, like appreciating like leisure time and not
Mhm.
having to be like on this hamster wheel nonstop.
Yeah. I'm still on the, siesta schedule. That's something I've taken away. I took a quick little power nap before this interview,
Nice. Very good.
midday.
That's awesome. So talk to me about the podcasting journey. Were you listening to them at the time and where did the inspiration for that start?
Yeah, I was listening to podcasts a lot. I was listening to them a lot while I traveled, all different types of podcasts, news podcasts, like pop culture podcasts, of course, like murder, crime, mystery. Like that's, I'm just like a sucker for that.
Yeah.
But I was, listening to all these podcasts and just really like enjoying them. I enjoyed like the storytelling. I really liked kind of the mix of like music within certain podcasts, depending on what they are. I loved like interviewings, like hearing two people just kind of like just talk and just discuss the topic, just gabbing. And a lot of times I felt like I could relate to what certain people were saying. And I felt like I had listened to some podcasts that I had never heard people talk about the topics that they were
Yeah.
discussing. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, I've never heard anyone like do this before. And I just felt like I was getting so much out of podcasts. And so that was kind of how the idea came about. I was like, I don't know a lot of like Black podcasters, and I don't know a lot of like Black travelers either, or like Black travel podcasters. And so
Yeah.
I was like, maybe this should be something like I can explore, and it's something that is like personal and like intimate to me. I'm just kind of starting out, like sharing my own travel experiences. So it just seemed like, oh, this is like the type of content I want to create, and like hopefully other people can relate to it because that's what I gained from listening to podcasts.
And did you know what the format was going to be, or what were some those thoughts you had early on?
No, I had no idea what the format was going to be. I was just like, I am just going to like press record and just like start talking and see how that goes. And so then I did that. And I was like, okay, that wasn't bad. And then I was like, the next episode, I'm going to try talking again, but I'm going to like write down what I want to say before and see how that went. And then I was like, this is nice. This is fun. But I like, once again, I like love the banter between two people. I love two people having a discussion because I feel like someone can bring something out of you that you might not necessarily say on the microphone if you're by yourself. So I was like, I need to interview people. And then the first interview I did was with one of my friends. And I was like, this is the path I want to take. I was like, I love this. Like, and I felt like I got to know my friend better by doing that interview. So that's kind of how I got into doing the interview style.
You said you had mentioned you had been listening to shows. Did you have anyone you were like inspired by? And naturally, every podcast when they start, they do have the questions because they need some sort of guide rails. But did you find that as you started having more and more experience with the interviews, that you also went off script and worked off what the guest was giving you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say when I first started interviewing people, I wasn't really like doing a script. And then I was like, as I did more, I was like, I want to kind of add like a structure to this, maybe have like segments, like ask like little fun questions, like how can I like keep people engaged? How can I keep my interviewee engaged with me? Because I don't want every episode to like be the same. Like, where have you gone? Like, where do you like to go? What's your favorite place? What's your favorite thing to do? Like, it's traveling so much deeper than that for people. So I wanted to like, I sat down and like continuously sit down and like think of like thought provoking questions for my guests.
That's me. Sorry. Was there already a Black travel community that you were a part of, or is this something that sort of like created because you're putting these worlds together?
There was not. After I started the podcast, I tried to look for that kind of like online group or community. And I found some groups like here and there. And then as I like did the podcast more, I found more and more groups. And, it just kind of like unfolded after that. I was like, okay, so there is a community of people, Black travelers talking about their experience traveling while Black, which is great.
And these are just forums or sites that were on?
Yeah, I mean, like Facebook groups, just social media accounts, and like blogger influencers, if you will. So,
A couple here and there.
yeah.
And so you're now on season 3. So talk a little bit about the journey of like how far out do you plan? Do you know like the content you're going to have? Do you know like do you have a wish list of people you'd love to have on the show?
I don't have like a wish list of people with this third season. It's been very interesting. I started doing kind of like video interviews and kind of incorporating like having like a live setting, if you will, with certain people that like live here in Atlanta. And so I wanted to kind of make it more of not like a game show, but just make it like more interactive for people that have listened to the show previously. So that was kind of what I've done with season 3. Season 3 has been great. I've met a lot of amazing people while doing this season. So it's the show's like come a long way, and I have a lot of people wanting to like be on the show, and they reach out and they're like, hey, I do this thing, I've listened to your show, I know that you haven't had someone talk about this before, I would love to like talk about this perspective. And it's been so nice because like the last guy I interviewed, he actually started his own like travel backpack company.
Okay.
And what's special about his travel backpack company, I mean, I could be wrong 'cause I don't know of any Black owned travel backpack companies. So he's the first one that I knowingly know of. But his backpacks are like specifically designed for sneakers
Hmm.
and shoes. It still has like a normal like traveling backpack. You can put clothes and stuff in it, your laptop. It's a carry-on size, but he like designed specific compartments. So if you really care about your shoes, if you're a sneakerhead and have spent hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on your shoes, he's created little compartments to help keep them safe. And so it's really nice to like meet people like that are, doing really cool things. So
What's interesting because other unique perspective, because you would think like if you had shoes that were really, really nice and you wanted to take care of them, you wouldn't normally put that with something that you'd associate with like hiking or being on
yeah,
a trail or anything like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But it's almost speaks to like, yeah, I'm gonna like go on this rough hike, but I also want to go out at night. So I want to go, I want to look good. So
Yeah, exactly. And you never know, like if you do go on a hike, like while traveling, if your shoes get all muddy, then you kind of
yeah,
have like that compartment to keep them away
yes.
from the rest of your clothes. So,
So that's good segues into this other question I have because naturally when you start talking about a travel podcast and a travel show, you use gear, like, as a traveler, right? And
mhm,
there's a lot of things, from backpacks to shoes to like a whole range of stuff. And
mhm.
hiking could be one of those, or traveling could be one of those expensive hobbies if you're not careful, because there's always like a new toy or a new
Oh,
gadget.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, have you had any conversations or tell me about experiences mentioning companies or vendors or thoughts about that for the show?
I have, mentioned like a couple people here and there, and like on my website and the blog, I give, out some travel advice for people and like, brands that I use, but there's so many amazing brands out there and a lot of travel companies trying to like keep up with, the aesthetic and like, when traveling was at its peak, it's not now, but really like creating these like really cool like backpacks or like compartmentalizing different ways for your clothing and just all these things. So there's so many amazing like travel companies out there doing cool things.
Yeah, I mean, I get the sense that we do this sometimes with our clients. Like they want to get a sponsor for the show, so we help them put together a media kit. And
Mhm,
a lot of times when people are getting started in podcasting, they'll think about their numbers and they'll be like, oh, I don't have enough numbers. I don't have enough downloads. Like, what sponsor is going to be interested in me?
mhm.
But I think when you position it as your platform, so saying, hey, this is the show. This is what I've been doing. These are the reviews I've gotten for it. I'm on season 3. These are the people I've spoken to. But also, like, what's your other visibility, like on Twitter, on Facebook, on
Mhm.
LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
if you start adding those up, you get into the thousands.
Yeah.
And then how you're explaining it to sponsors is saying, this is my platform reach.
Mhm.
And you don't even mention it anymore, just like downloads. And so when you've partnered with me, you're going to get the reach of me on all these platforms.
Yeah.
And that's so much more attractive. So I get the sense, I mean, sounds like there could be opportunities for you to, like, and
Yeah.
work with companies that are in alignment with what your values are as well.
Yeah, definitely something I would like to look into once the travel industry is like take such a beating at this moment. And I feel for those like smaller businesses that were, creating backpacks and luggage and little like travel knickknacks for people. And they just don't really need those things right now. So I'm hoping when things like pick up with them that maybe they look into podcasting as something that they want to reach like a newer audience as like kind of like a rebranding thing. So we'll definitely see. And I work in marketing a little bit myself, and I saw this thing, I think it was on LinkedIn, and it was talking about downloads and like sponsors, and it was just like all of these things are like vanity metrics. They're just like, don't look at those as like something that you need to like get sponsors. It's really about like your content, your niche,
Absolutely.
um, the engagement that you have. Like you could have like 100 people that are constantly engaging with you, and like that can be enough for a brand. So I really like think about it that way. Absolutely.
And the way I've heard it described, which is more important, is you have to think like a marketer and also as the person with the product, like what's a lifetime value of a customer for them. So like when someone buys something for them, or if it's a repeat item, or they buy two or three things, like now this thing that they sell for like $50 or $40, really, if they think lifetime value, like it's $200 $300, like if they can keep one customer, because they know they can sell them other stuff. And so as
Absolutely.
a podcaster, we have to think like marketers think sometimes, and not be like, oh, I'd be happy if they just gave me $5. Like we're always selling ourselves short. And I think we need to sort of be able to speak their language. And, if they're just coming at us looking for one metric, be like, no, you're getting a bigger, a better picture by working with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so I just want to, so talking about COVID, obviously that was it was like a seismic event for the travel industry. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what was happening in your world, and then, naturally being in the travel space, like what you were hearing from like any people that you know in the industry.
So at first, I had actually just got back from Panama. I did a trip in Panama beginning of February. And, I had all these trips planned out. Actually, one of my bucket list things was to do 30 countries before I was 30,
Whoa.
uh, which did not happen. But I had a lot of trips like planned last year, just like many of us, and this year as well. And so when COVID first hit, I was like, okay, this is what I'm talking about on the podcast. This is what I might be talking about for like a couple weeks, since it was, ongoing. And I felt like a lot of different people within the travel community were impacted. And so, I interviewed like flight attendants, I interviewed like travel nurses, and just to get their perspective on like how their industry and their specific niche has been impacted. And then it really set in that this ride that we were on was gonna take a lot longer than I think a lot of us thought. I think a lot
Yeah.
of us thought it was gonna be like a couple months. And then, especially for me having a travel podcast, I was like, this is not gonna like discourage me. I'm gonna find a way to keep putting out content. I'm gonna keep making episodes. And even though, as much as I would like to say that COVID has not discouraged me from podcasting, it might lately it has a little bit, because I don't want to beat the COVID thing to death, and I have just been trying to think about traveling in different ways than how we necessarily talk about it, as such as us taking a trip somewhere. So I'm just trying to think about it differently and not so linearly. So that's kind of the position that COVID's put me in. And then, all the travel people that I follow on social media, like I've just seen like a huge decline in the amount of content that they post. And so I think a lot of us are just feeling very like, at first it was like, oh, we can't travel for a little bit. Oh, this sucks. We can't travel. Oh, like I'll travel again soon. And now it's like, I have no idea.
Hmm.
And even though, you can go to like Aruba, Mexico. Like for me, it just like ethically doesn't feel right to be able to do that. I feel like it's a privilege, and I just feel like right now is not the time. So that's why I'm going to do a little cross country road trip to like keep traveling like fresh, and like so I still feel like some type of movement and momentum, and like be able to approach my podcast with like a new angle.
Talk to me a little bit about the cross country trip you're planning.
So when I say planning, I'm not like planning because I don't plan any trip. I just do it.
Yeah. And we were just talking about Nomad Land as well. So
Yeah, exactly. Like usually, I mean, I'm no stranger to just like buying a one-way ticket somewhere and then like figuring it out
I love that.
from there. Or so I am just going to kind of like pack up my car with my necessary belongings and hit the road and figure it out along the way. I have a general idea of where I want to go. So I'll be driving from Atlanta out west. I think, I'm going to start in New Orleans and Austin. And these are places I've already been, but I really haven't explored out west that much and done all the national parks. So, and I have some friends and family out there. So I'm going to stop and see them along the way. In which order, I haven't decided, but I'm just going to kind of go. And some people are like, I can't believe like you're going to do this without a plan. And I'm like, do you know who I am? I've
Have you
like,
met me?
yeah, like I've like gone to foreign countries with no plan. Like at least I'm in the United States. Like worst case scenario is I'm somewhere and I just have to like take a flight back to Atlanta or something. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
don't know what the worst case scenario would be in the situation, but I feel really comfortable not having a plan, but like having a general idea of what I'm doing. So,
You have your AAA membership
yep.
updated?
I got my AAA. Like I said, I just bought a new car. Like, so it's ready to have miles put on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And like I camp and somewhat outdoorsy. So I feel pretty confident.
And what are you thinking about from a content perspective? Because I mean, that I love the sound of that, and I
Yeah.
love this idea of you sort of journaling the voyage as well. One of the books I read early on was On the Road, and I
Mhm.
remember first time I read that, I was just like, "Whoa!" This idea of like, and this is probably like in the 50s, right? Is
Yeah.
how much more pristine the land was back then. But
Mhm.
this idea of journaling your trip across and telling folks what you see, because a lot of people won't be able to experience what you're going to be able to experience, and so it's just this idea of capturing the story along the way is really nice.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing a couple different things. Like I said, like with the last season, I was doing like some video content. So I'm kind of thinking about continuing that with the new season and doing little like videos of different places that I've gone, as well as I think I might do a mixed bag. I think I'm gonna do episodes where I'm just like in a particular place and I'm just doing the whole episode there. And random people might come by and like stop by on the show. So that's like one thing I want to do. And then the second thing I want to do is also just probably interview some people along the way. I really want to interview a truck driver.
Nice. Yeah, of course.
I really want to get the travel perspective from a truck driver and see what their life is like. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about right
There's no shortage of those. You just got to be careful where you hold the
I know,
interview.
I know. Like, so don't be surprised if I'm just, like, at, like, a gas station with the truck driver. Do it.
Just let someone know, a loved one know ahead of time where you're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's exciting. That's really cool. I think you're going to have a blast there. How have you grown as a person, or I mean, a podcaster, from all these conversations that you've had and connecting with these people on your show?
I think I've grown, like, confidence and communication skills, if you will. My communication skills, I would say, have gotten a little bit better. At least I hope. I feel like people that have listened to my show, and my friends especially, have been like, "You just sound so much more, like, confident when you're interviewing people." And I think that, like, has translated over just into my personal life as well. But, having random people, like, reach out to me and just, like, tell me that, like, they love the show, or they like it makes me feel good. I'm not gonna lie, And so it's great because I just feel like I just like kind of like created this thing to like have something to do, like be fun, like play around with audio, play around with podcasting. And I've like really like fallen in love with like podcasting and what it is, because it's just a medium that has connected so many people and also allowed space and given people a platform to make their voice or their story feel important. And it's just like, it's incredible. Like at podcasting, I'm so interested to see how it continues to evolve. I don't know. I've learned there's so much to learn from people through podcasting. So that journey will be never ending. So I like to think that I'm going to keep changing while I interview people and like gain a new perspective
Yeah,
from other
absolutely.
people. So
What's interesting is something that stood out when I was looking at your about page is how you mentioned that this was an opportunity to tell the stories of a solo Black queer woman traveler. And when you think about all the Venn diagram circles that have to come together to make that combination possible, have you had, any feedback from, people that have, seen you as a role model and someone who's inspiring them to do, push themselves out of these preconceived notions of what we can do?
yeah, absolutely. And that's what has like kept me going is, in those times of doubt of like, oh, like people listen to my show, but is anyone like actually listening to my show? The moment like I get a message from someone and they're like, I love this episode. Like I've always wanted to go here. Like, thank you for sharing your experience. Like, thank you just for like providing that platform. And then all the guests that I bring on the show, a lot of them are just like everyday people, but they love traveling and they just like want to talk about it. And they're like, thank you for providing, that space for me to be able to like talk about what traveling has like done for my life, because traveling for certain people has been extremely life changing. And now certain people can talk about how it's changed their lives. And so it's been nice to feel like I've like impacted a few people.
I can't imagine how that doesn't continue to grow. I think especially if more people discover the show. From a promotional perspective, everyone knows when you're getting started as a solo podcaster, you literally have to like do everything. You have
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
sit that first year, you're editing the show, you're marketing the show, promoting it. Like you literally have to like wear every single hat. So
Yeah.
what's been working for you from a promotional perspective?
I would say I really like LinkedIn.
Interesting.
I know. I do a lot of like engaging with listeners and other podcasters on LinkedIn and just kind of staying up with like the industry trends, if you will, on LinkedIn. I think I've learned a lot about podcasting through people I follow on LinkedIn. So that's like helped a lot. And then on the other flip side of that, I get like a lot of people being like, "Hey, like, can I like edit your audio or can I do this? Can I do your marketing?" And I'm like, actually, I love doing every single part of it, but thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's been interesting to kind of like watch that industry grow as well with like a lot of people, producing and managing podcasts and doing the marketing. And I'm like, I don't mind being a one woman team for right now
Yeah, yeah.
because it's like the podcast is so personal to me. It just feels wrong to give someone else the audio and be like, hey,
Yeah,
you edit it and like tell the
yeah.
story that you think that we should. So it doesn't feel right.
Do you do a lot of editing? Because I know for these, they typically like will go straight through and will remove any like ums and ahs and second takes. But it's pretty much just, straightforward interview. And the other flip side of that is like the gimlets, the wonderies, like they're doing like,
Yeah.
they probably charge, I think the quotes are like $1,000 a minute for production value of those.
Yeah.
So they're moving audio around. They're actually telling, a narrative story. Which of those are you doing?
It depends on the episode. More recently, I've just kind of, I'll edit the episode out like here and there. At the beginning, I was like, I'm going to take out everything I say, like
Every breath.
every breath. I'm going to take it all out. Like I'm going to have the cleanest audio. And then I just got to the point where it's like, that works.
But the other thing is that what people don't realize, and because you're listening to podcasts on headphones, you can hear the breaths.
Hmm.
And when you don't hear someone breathing, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
Like it's because you can't, it's like a robot, like
Yeah.
speaking. You're just like, and I remember someone gave me an episode of a show they did that I was on, and I was like, I could tell, like, it's like this weird, and not too much of a difference because it's not like I was speaking, but just that small breath or hearing me take the breath, I
Yeah.
think is just humanizes the conversation. And sometimes you need a pause when you ask a question that's like a meaningful question that sounds like someone gave it some thought.
Exactly. And I think that's why I started to get it wasn't like laziness, but I was like, I'm just gonna like let that slide because I think like I want people when they listen to my podcast, just like when I listen to a podcast when two people are talking, like I want to feel like I'm in the same room as them, you know?
Yes, yes.
And I want to feel like I'm a part of the conversation, you know? And it's just it's a natural thing for us to do. And so I keep it. The only thing I like really edit out is any like repeats or if
Yeah,
someone like stumbles over
yeah,
themselves.
yeah.
But the uhs and the ums, I'm just like, I'll leave it.
I think, and what's beautiful about this show is because it's a podcast about podcasting and
Yeah.
podcasters. Like, there's mistakes, or like a guest dog will jump in their lap, and I'll be like, "What's your dog's name?" They're on the show now. Like, just it's just real life. Like,
Yeah.
it's real life. Like, there's that BBC video of like the little kid jumping in the background of this reporter from years ago, like because he was doing it from home, so, which everybody loved because it's
Yeah.
like, oh, you're a human being. You're
Yeah.
not like an automaton. What's been the impact or the reaction from family members and people close to you? Like, has the way that they've seen you changed ever since you've been on this journey, this podcasting journey?
Yeah, I would say my mom, when I like first told her about the idea, she was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then I like kept doing it and she was like, and I would like tell her like, "Oh, I like interviewed this person." She's like, "Oh, that's cool." And then my mom was like featured on like a couple podcasts, and then I think she like really started to understand, like for her business, she really started to understand what podcasting was.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
she
yeah.
was like, "Oh, so I did this podcast. This is what we did." And then she would like send me like hints or like advice, like things that they sent her, or like just little things here and there that she would send me. And then she signed up for my Patreon. I'm not sure she knows specifically what it is. I don't know if she realizes that she just gave me a monthly allowance to do my show.
That's hilarious. That's so funny.
But yeah, she was like looking it up online, looking for an episode, and then the Patreon came up, and then she signed up, and I was like, "Mom, thank you." And
I got
so
my allowance back.
yes. So I don't think she realizes that she is my biggest physical and actual supporter.
But it must feel good because you're being rewarded for the hard work you
Yeah,
put in, and
yeah.
I mean, as creators, that's all we want, and to be recognized for the work we do. And I think these platforms that are coming up, we're able to monetize this content. There's some interesting things happening in the podcasting space with the ability to compensate people similar to a Patreon. There's a service called glow.fm. You can create a private feed. So anything we can do to like help the creator economy, get paid for the work they do, I think is going to be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of questions as we wrap up. What's something that you've changed your mind about recently?
What's something I've changed my mind about recently? I think I have changed my mind about Brussels sprouts. I know that's not what you're expecting me to say.
That's it. No, I love it. I love it because that's why I asked that question, because anything's on the table.
I think that I just don't know how to make Brussels sprouts correctly, and that's my issue. And I kept like the first time I had them, someone else made them for me. I was at a restaurant. I was like, I love Brussels sprouts. And then I was trying to make them and I was like, Brussels sprouts aren't that good. It's kind of weird. And then once again, someone else made them for me. And I was like, I love Brussels sprouts. So I'm back on the Brussels sprouts train and asked for their advice on how to make Brussels sprouts. So I've changed my mind. I love them.
This is so funny because there is a way, like if something magical happens when you're in a restaurant and they bring them out and they're like perfectly charred
Yeah,
and crispy, because that's when they're good. And you're like, they've got just like olive oil and whatever they're like seasoned perfectly, and like,
perfectly.
this is amazing, amazing food. And then you buy the frozen pack of Brussels sprouts and you forget to like cut them in halves, or you try to saute them and they're
Yeah.
just like soggy,
Yeah.
like a soggy, lumpy, like mess. And it's like something wrong here. Like, this
Yeah.
is not, yeah. So I know exactly what you're talking about. That's so funny. What's the most misunderstood thing about you?
That I don't know, people always tell me that, not always, but people have told me that I can be like intimidating,
Hmm.
which I think that's misunderstanding about me. I don't really see myself as intimidating at all, but you know, I would say that, but I feel like I'm like misunderstood often, but I don't know why as well
Hmm.
too. I feel like I am in some situations where I feel like I'm like expressing like a concern or something, and like it like the other person doesn't seem to understand it. I don't know.
It's interesting because it's all almost a function of what's going on in their world.
Mhm.
And I'm in a yeah, I have in a relationship with my partner, and anyone who's in a sort of relationship long term over, a couple of years knows like communication is so important. And sometimes like I'll get upset because I thought I was like being, spoken to in a way that I didn't like, and that wasn't the intention.
Mhm.
But it's just because I have this like core belief of like my parents scolding me or something like that,
Yeah.
some crazy thing
Yeah.
that I'm seeing the world from within my bubble, and then if you can just swallow your pride, like
Mhm.
bite your tongue and be like, "Did you mean what you said when you
Yeah.
said this?" And I think little things like that can go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think what I love about podcasting is the ability to have these conversations and connect with people on a one-to-one level. So we met through Podcast Movement. I think the mentor programs. How's that experience been for you?
It's been great. I got some new gear and stuff,
That's right.
and really been enjoying, like, playing with it, and it's, like, made me want to start another podcast. I really want to do, like, a murder travel mystery podcast.
Like a murder on the Orient Express vibe.
Yeah, something like that, just because I have, like, this equipment and I love, like, playing around with audio, and, like, I really want it to actually just be, like, a storytelling type thing, so I can, like, play around with, like, some Foley sounds and some music and make it creepy and cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Have
yeah.
you checked out the work of Q Code Studios?
Mm-mm.
They're like the newest like studio that's like killing it. Like they had a show with Demi Moore. They just launched a new show. I forgot. There's a couple of like actors, like big actors, I think, like that are creating like podcasts, and they're doing some really, really interesting stuff. There was an article in the New York Times about the future of like podcasts in Hollywood,
Oh, wow.
and it was just out like 3 or 4 days ago. I'll send you the link.
Yeah.
And they talked about the work that Q Code is doing. Like really, they got 15 shows planned this year, and it's really that immersive. I need to listen to more of those shows because when you listen to them, when they're done right, and you close your eyes, like you get transported to the place. And so I totally like love that vibe, that theater of the mind.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
So I guess that'll be your second show. So we'll make sure to
Yeah.
keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah, please do.
Well, Jerka, thank you so much for being flexible with this rescheduling.
Yeah,
I'm glad we got connected. I was really inspired to like hear more about the show and now just know more about your journey. I lived in Atlanta too. I think I may have mentioned that when we spoke last time, but
maybe, yeah.
yeah, I lived in Canada Park for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what they say, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And so with the impact that you've had in the travel industry, I think you've been able to turn that around and inspire others who are listening that through perseverance, keeping with your show,
Mhm.
giving people like hope, that there's going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. I
Yeah.
think that you're doing really good things with your show.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me on, it's great. I like this, like, talking to you put that, like, "Okay, I'm not over podcasting," like, I just
No,
and, like, I feel like I'm always getting to, like, my breaking point, like, "Oh, this is gonna be my last episode," and then I do an interview, and then I'm like, "I love it so much." I always walk away, like, I would have never had that conversation with someone if podcasting didn't exist?
I totally get it. Like sometimes I'm busy, like I have like work with my business and I have like a couple of shows and I'm like, I see an interview coming up and I get like a little anxious sometimes. Like I gotta like change gears.
Mhm.
But then you have conversations like this and just, I mean, I know exactly what you mean. Just like, this is the best part of my day. Like,
Yeah,
when especially since we can't go out, especially since we can't go to conferences, like
exactly.
this is that long form. And we probably are speaking longer now than we would at a conference anyway because
Exactly.
we'd be speaking for like 5 or 10 minutes, like in the hallway or something
Mhm.
like that. So this is all better for that. And now when we get to see each other in person, we'll get to have a hug and just say hello, like
Yeah.
back in the old days.
Yeah, it's crazy because I did, like, this time last year actually, I think this exact weekend, I was at Podfest
Hotfest, yeah, I was
in
there.
Orlando, and
That's
that
crazy.
was, like, the last thing I did before, like,
That's
a
so
full
funny.
shutdown, and I was, like, shaking hands. I remember some people were like, "COVID, no, like, we're not worried about it." Like, everyone was tight into rooms, packed.
Like we can't even imagine being in that space. But yeah, my partner and I were there, and we stayed for like an extra couple of days, and we landed like back in Minneapolis on March 12th, and like the next day, like lockdown across the world. It was wild. Like, and
Yeah,
everyone, yeah, we're like, oh, how bad can it be? Like at the conference.
exactly.
Little did
So,
we
yeah.
know. So we'll have those days soon enough. Where's the
Mhm.
best place for folks to learn more about the show and connect with you?
I'm out there on every platform, I feel like, social media wise, Blackpacking podcast as far as like my Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
and of course, you can listen to the show on iTunes and Spotify, you name it. It's
Yeah.
there. You just got to
We're,
Google
we're,
it.
you've got a great domain too. Like once, like Blackpacking podcast, there's only going to be you. And I think just having that branding is really powerful. So I'm excited
Yeah.
for what coming for you in the future. And I'm glad we're going to stay connected. Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Jarika for coming on the show. Much appreciated. Again, full show notes at podcastjunkies.com/258. Intro and outro music composed by Cedar and Soil. Special thanks to our episode sponsor, Focusrite. Don't forget to check out the full line at podcastjunkies.com/Focusrite. I'm specifically a fan of the Scarlett 2i2 Pro. Podcast production and marketing provided by Fullcast. Sign up for a free podcast brainstorm at fullcast.co/chat15. Tune in next episode for my conversation with Will Conway, host of Baggage Claim. And shout out to Esprit Devora for making that introduction. And if you made it this far, you're no doubt looking for this week's retention hashtag. Let's go with Traveling Jarika, and her name is spelled Jarika, and tag her at Blackpacking Pod, and of course, podcast_junkies. Thanks for all you to support the show. Talk to you next week.